Good morning, everybody. It's past 10 past 10, so let's make a start. The sitting is therefore open. Could I remind members that in order to be registered for the sitting, you should insert your badge when you take your seat and keep it inserted for at least 30 seconds. You should also insert your badge in order to speak or vote, and to request the floor, please press the request button just once. Could I also remind the Assembly that members who have not submitted an annual declaration of interests are required to start any intervention with an oral declaration of interests under paragraph 20 of the Code of Conduct for members of the Parliamentary Assembly. Now, colleagues, our first business this morning is to consider the changes proposed in the membership of committees set out in the document Commission's 2026-01 and Addendum 2, and the appointment of members to the Special Committee on the New Democratic Pact, which have been published in the Commission period 2026-02. Can I first of all ask, are these agreed to? Is there any disagreement? There is not. Okay. In that case, we can take that as having been approved. The next item of business this morning is the debate on the report entitled Strengthening Democracies with Young People from Participation to Shared Responsibility. It's document 16308, and it will be presented by Ms. Sonia Gazarian on behalf of the Committee on Culture, Science, Education and Media. We will then hear from Ms. Elisabetta Gardini, who will present an opinion on behalf of the Committee on Political Affairs and Democracy. As ever, in order to finish on time by midday, I will interrupt the list of speakers at about 11:45 to allow time for the reply and the vote. So could I now call on Ms. Gazarian, the rapporteur. You have 7 minutes now and 3 minutes at the end to reply to the debate. The floor is yours.
Distinguished members, colleagues, it's an honor to stand today before you to present the report. The revised title is not a matter of semantics. It marks a decisive shift in perspective, away from viewing young people as passive beneficiaries of democracy towards recognizing them as a full partners at its very core. When we meet today, the timing is both urgent and challenging. Across Europe, young citizens are expressing new hopes, but also deep and growing frustration. Recent polls and research make this unmistakably clear. Many young people are losing trust in our institutions and increasingly feel that their voices, their votes, carry little real weight in shaping their future. Economic insecurity, the rising cost of living, precarious employment, house shortages, and increasingly fragile mental health outlook are not merely social concerns. They risk eroding democratic legitimacy itself and deepening generational divides across our societies. The Council of Europe's New Democratic Pact for Europe rightly acknowledges that the energy, creativity, and strong sense of justice expressed by young people must no longer remain on the margins of political life. They must be placed at its center. This call was powerfully echoed in Malta at the 10th Conference of Ministers responsible for youth, where governments adopted the reference framework calling for a systematic youth perspective across all areas of policy and decision-making. It is on this foundation that the Cultures Committee report calls for a genuine step change from consultation to shared responsibility. Young people must not only be present, they must have real power and institutionalized avenues of influence. The Council of Europe's pioneering co-management system, centered on the Advisory Council of Youth, offers a clear and proven model that all member states can and should follow. Its principle of equal partnership between young people and public authorities in shaping priorities and strategies is not merely innovative. It is dispensable if democracy is to weather the storms we face today. Colleagues, the recommendations presented to you today are ambitious, but they are also very practical and achievable. They call on every member state to adopt or to update comprehensive framework for youth participation and to translate them into clear, measurable outcomes. This means creating and strengthening youth councils and advisory bodies with genuine mandates, ensuring the meaningful presence of young people and young politicians across all the levels of decision-making, from parliaments and boards to ministries and local authorities. From local authorities to the ministries, when they should support participatory young youth budgeting and promoting innovative mechanisms such as the youth juries and digital assemblies, where young voices are central to deliberalization rather than treated as an afterthought. Our debates have also made it very clear to me that the obstacles young people face are significant and complex. Social media, once celebrated as a space for democratic promise, has increasingly become a source of harassment, hate speech, disinformation, and exclusion. At the same time, young women, minority groups, and those living in rural areas face distinct and often compounding barriers to participation. In response, the committee has unanimously agreed on stronger language, calling for more robust legal protection offline and online. I would also like to recognize the irreplaceable contribution of youth NGOs and activists who enriched and animated our discussion. Thank you. Their passion, expertise, and lived experience have directly shaped the proposals before you. In particular, the Advisory Council on Youth, one of the pillars of the Council of Europe's youth sector, must receive sustained and enhanced support. Only then can it contribute to building a democratic architecture that includes all young people, not merely the most connected or privileged ones. Turning these recommendations into reality will require national parliaments. It will require us to fully assume their role. This means scrutinizing budgets and legislation, measuring access and outcomes through reliable data, inviting young people to table as co-authors of policy, and ensuring that their involvement is permanent and sustainable, so it cannot be sidelined in times of crisis. Colleagues, this agenda demands clear political will to guarantee quality education and training, alongside fair access to housing and health care, to mainstream gender equality and ensure the full inclusion of minorities and persons with disabilities, to invest decisively in both civic education and non-formal learning, and not merely to debate youth voting rights, but to act by lowering the voting age to 16, a reform that evidence constantly shows strengthens engagement and trust in democratic institutions. Beyond Western Europe, our democratic responsibility must extend further. That is why we strongly support the creation of a European Youth Centre in the Black Sea region, an act of solidarity and clear expression of faith in democratic potential of every young citizen, from the Atlantic to the South Caucasus. In closing, democracy cannot be renewed without young people as architects and equal partners. Shared responsibility requires every parliament and every government not simply to speak about youth, but to act with youth, for youth. I therefore call you to give your full support to this resolution and recommendations, and to recognize in every decision you take the opportunity to build a democratic Europe sustained by the creativity, energy, and hope of its youngest citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Kazarian. I now call on Ms Gardini for the opinion from the Committee on Political Affairs and Democracy. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, President. Dear colleagues, I am presenting today the opinion of the Committee on Political Affairs and Democracy on the report Strengthening Democracies with Young People from Participation to Shared Responsibility. Firstly, I would like to warmly congratulate the rapporteur, Mrs. Sona Ghazarian, on her outstanding work. She addresses a central challenge for our democracies. How can we ensure that young people are not only heard, but are genuinely involved in democratic life? Both the report and our opinion share a simple yet fundamental belief that democratic institutions are stronger when young people are involved, when young minds can contribute meaningfully to decisions that affect their futures. The Committee on Political Affairs and Democracy fully supports this approach. Our amendments aim to reinforce this conviction in 3 ways: encouraging the full implementation of earlier resolutions on youth issues, linking youth-related activities to the work on the new Democratic Pact, engaging young people who are already politically active in dialogue with us. Regarding the first point, I welcome the fact that the report refers to Resolution 2553/2024. This resolution represented an important step forward. It created the PACE youth participation mechanism and introduced the role of youth rapporteurs in committees. Our amendments aim to make youth rapporteurs more visible to ensure that young people's views are included across committee work and plenary debates. Further amendments establish a link to the new Democratic Pact for Europe. It can benefit significantly from the involvement of young people, and the Assembly is already actively contributing to the Pact, including through its ad hoc committee. Finally, we propose strengthening dialogue with young political minds from our countries. In my experience, our parties' youth organizations are full of young talent. It is important to support this potential and encourage interest in our Assembly. I hope we can help achieve this. To sum it up, this report makes the Assembly more open and responsive to youth voices. I believe that this opinion strengthens the political message of the report. For these reasons, I invite the Assembly to support this opinion and the proposed amendments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Gardini. We'll move on now to the speakers from each group. Just to remind everybody that the time limit is 3 minutes for spokespersons from political groups and 2 minutes for everybody else. Could I now call on behalf of the Socialist Group, Ms Aisu Bankolia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, I would like to begin by thanking to the rapporteur for this timely report. It rightly focuses on meaningful youth participation, social inequality, and the structural barriers that prevent young people from fully engaging in democratic life. Young people across our societies are asking not for symbolic gestures, but for real influence. Participation limited to consultations or advisory panels is no longer enough. Democracy must evolve toward a model of shared responsibility where young people genuinely shape the decisions that affect their lives. Today, many young people feel excluded from political processes across Europe. Trust in institutions is declining and young people feel unheard. This exclusion is deepened by inequality, job insecurity, and the housing crisis which deny young people stability and dignity. Therefore, we must confront the hostile environment that deters political engagement. Rising hate speech against young activists requires stronger legal protections to safeguard their voices in the public sphere. We must also address the socioeconomic disadvantages that disproportionately affect young women who often face a double burden of precarious employment and systematic discrimination. In our workplaces and educational spaces, we see a trend of age-based mobbing. Young people are often dismissed as inexperienced or exploited as a cheap labor, a perception that undermines their immediate rights as citizens. We should transform our institutional structures to ensure every young person can participate safely and with dignity. As one of the youth reporters in this Assembly, I want to also underline this clearly. Youth participation must not remain decorative. We must move beyond lip service by implementing institutional reform and adapting the co-management system as a standard for national governments. Dear colleagues, young people must move from consultation to decision-making power, not as guests in democracy, but as its co-owners. So we should call on institutions to open their structures, budgets, and policy processes to young people as equal partners. Because if we continue to sideline the youth, we risk losing not just a generation, but the very legitimacy of our democracies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, the next speaker on behalf of the EPP is Ms. Elisaveta Jasko.
Dear colleagues, I want to thank the rapporteur for this report and especially for providing very concrete recommendations, such as lowering the age, the voting age, providing more mandates for young people. But as Ukrainian, I want to say, let's be very honest. In my country, in my society, when the state was not delivering opportunities for young people, or actually not for young people, what did we do? We were trying to fill that gaps ourselves. When the war started in 2014 and our state wasn't able to deliver some functions, we've got volunteering movement filled by many people, young people, older people, just because we believe when there is no mandate, we have to create that. When there is a gap, we have to do that. And when thinking about what I want to say today, I was thinking about my own motivation, why I wanted to go into politics. I was born in 1990, and at that year, that was the year when, for instance, my parents before lost all their savings. My father is a musician, and in the 90s, he couldn't stay as a musician in Ukraine. He had to go abroad to earn for a living. So the economic motivation for me to go and to argue and to act for a change in my country so that our people will have better economic opportunities, better social opportunities was always a part of my motivation. But there, of course, there is another motivation about the freedom, about our identity, that I know that you are aware of that. When we talk about Ukraine, there is one very interesting fact that when we were elected, our parliament, the average age in our parliament at that stage was 39 years old. In our party, it was 34. Of course, now, after 6.5 years almost, the age a little bit got older. But I want to say that when you're looking for some solutions, let's look at the case of the motivation when people just go on the streets and fight for what they want. And whether we like it or no, existential threat, when the war is knocking on the door, this is something that makes people go and fight. We can create a lot of mandates, and we should be doing that for young people. But the young people should also understand and believe in themselves with different examples of different societies when people go and fight for their future. Ukraine has a great social mobility, and I'm proud to say that. And I just hope that with the war of aggression, there will be young people left in our country, because many of us are already killed or wounded, or our lives are destroyed. Good luck to young people and to our democracies. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker on behalf of ECPA is Madam Alexandra Skous.
Thanks, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, we are debating how to strengthen democracy with young people. The report is right to warn us if youth engagement becomes a ritual rather than a power to shape outcomes. We will not build trust, we will manufacture frustration. From an ECPA perspective, we support youth participation that is serious, representative, and accountable. And that starts with one principle: no tokenism. We do not want participation reduced to box-ticking through quotas. We need pathways that empower young people through merit, opportunity, and real responsibilities. My first point is therefore impact over optics. Youth councils, hearings, and structured dialogue can be useful, but only if they are transparent, open to diverse backgrounds, and linked to measurable follow-up. Otherwise, it becomes participation theater. Second, we must reject one-size-fits-all thinking. The report strongly supports lowering the voting age to 16. Engaging young people early is important, but the voting age is a profound constitutional choice. Each country must decide according to its democratic traditions, civic education, and societal consensus. Third, if we want young people to believe again in democracy, then we politicians must stick to democracy ourselves. That means respecting voters and the outcomes of elections. In recent years, we have too often seen a dangerous reflex. Democratically elected parties are pushed aside, delegitimized, or treated as untouchable, simply because others dislike their political views. This is not democratic resilience, it is democratic erosion. Young people see that, and they draw the conclusion that voting may change nothing. Fourth, we must be honest. As elected representatives, we have much more in our hands than we sometimes admit. If we truly want young people in politics, then we must do the practical work, put young, motivated candidates on our election list, support them, mentor them, and give them real responsibilities in our parliamentary groups and committees. And this brings me to a challenging and provocative question for all of us. Who in this room would be willing to give up his or her spot on an election list in favor of a young person? Because that is what shared responsibility looks like in real life, not in a resolution, but in our own parties and our own decisions. Colleagues, youth participation will not be rebuilt by slogans. It will be rebuilt by democratic consistency. Let us choose substance over symbolism, national democratic responsibility over templates, and respect for democratic choice over exclusion. If we do that, young Europeans will not turn away from democracy, they will step forward to lead it.
Thank you. The next speaker on behalf of ALDE is Ms. Yevgenia Kravchuk.
Thank you, Chair. Dear Sona, congratulations on this report and congratulations on yesterday's elections as the chair of the subcommittee on youth and society of the future. Of course, it's a very timely report, and actually today Council of Europe PACE is setting a gold standard by moving from just engagement of young people to real shared responsibility in decision-making processes. This report continues the standards that were already adopted together in this assembly, standards we believe in, and standards that we already implemented. And thanks to Malta to putting engagement with youth in the heart of their presidency. We see a powerful commitment to democracy among the new generations. And here comes the Eurobarometer data. We should have some data from Council of Europe countries, but over 70% of young people in the EU voted in recent elections. 64% of young Europeans have engaged in activities of organized youth movements in the last year. And they're not just ready to lead, they're already leading. And crucially, their priorities have shifted to reflect our reality. 31% of young Europeans now believe that security and defense should be the top priority, followed by climate change and public health. However, a significant gap remains. One in 3 young people feels they lack the necessary tools to participate effectively, and obviously we have to fill that gap. Ukraine serves as a living example of how young people take on this shared responsibility, even when they are facing a mortal danger. We have effectively implemented the call to establish youth councils. So now we have 664 youth councils from the local level to the national level. Volunteering among youth has more than doubled, rising from 20% to 42% since the full-scale invasion started. Lviv, as the European Youth Capital 2025, has become a symbol of resilience, providing young residents with the space to grow within their communities. And we're ready to exchange and share these unique experiences and expertise. And the democracy of the future, as described in this report, is impossible without a sustainable peace. I strongly encourage all colleagues to support this resolution because European democratic, safe, strong Europe of tomorrow cannot be built for young people. It must be built with them as equal and full partners today. Thank you, and please support this report.
Thank you. And the final speaker on behalf of the political groupings, on behalf of UEL, Ms. Janina Böttger.
Vielen Dank. Liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, als UEL unterstützen wir natürlich den Bericht, denn er macht deutlich, Jugendliche dürfen nicht nur symbolisch beteiligt werden. Sie brauchen echte Mitsprache, echte Verantwortung und echte Chancen. Doch Partizipation scheitert oft da, wo Armut den Alltag bestimmt, wo Schulen unterfinanziert sind, wo es keine Treffpunkte gibt, in denen junge Menschen lernen, sich organisieren und eben auch ihre Stimme erheben können. Wer nicht weiß, ob die Klassenfahrt bezahlbar ist, wer neben der Schule noch arbeiten muss, wer täglich um Anerkennung kämpft, der hat weder Zeit noch Lust auf Beteiligungsprozesse. So wird Mitbestimmung auch zu einer Frage der sozialen Herkunft. Wir fordern deshalb von den Mitgliedstaaten, richtet eure Ressourcen endlich darauf, wo sie am dringendsten gebraucht werden. Fangt mit den Brennpunktschulen an. Unterstützt die Kommunen, die unter struktureller Armut leiden, investiert in öffentliche Infrastruktur, in Bus und Bahn, deren Taktung auch zum Leben junger Menschen passen muss. Nur so lassen sich ungleiche Startbedingungen ausgleichen. Nur so wird demokratische Beteiligung kein Vorrecht der bereits Informierten und Privilegierten. Bildung, politische Beteiligung und Gleichberechtigung sollten einen Dreiklang bilden. Und ich erinnere noch mal an die Rede des Oberrabbiners, Herrn Meyer-Stampler, der gestern aus der Ukraine zu uns geschaltet war. In Gedenken an das Menschenrechtsverbrechen des Holocausts. Ich teile seine Einschätzung. Es geht nicht um eine Stunde mehr oder weniger Unterricht, sondern es geht um Haltung. Es geht um Vermittlung und das Lernen von Toleranz und Akzeptanz, von Mut und von Widerstand. Denn Unrecht passiert jeden Tag. Jeden Tag werden Menschen diskriminiert aufgrund Herkunft, Geschlecht, Religion, Behinderung, Alter oder sexueller Identität. Und umso wichtiger ist es, dass junge Menschen lernen, dies nicht zu akzeptieren, sondern mit Stärke darauf zu reagieren. Das geht nur, wenn unsere Bildungsinstitutionen gestärkt werden und den Umgang mit digitalen Medien kritischer und verantwortlicher gestaltet wird. Echte Beteiligung heißt nicht nur, dass junge Menschen abstimmen und reden dürfen. Es bedeutet, sie auszustatten mit Wissen, mit Werkzeugen und Räumen. Es bedeutet, ihre Ideen zur Zukunft der Gesellschaft aufzugreifen und tatsächlich in politisches Handeln mit einzubinden. Ihre Ideen müssen umgesetzt werden und wir müssen Ungleichheiten abbauen, die ihre Teilhabe behindern. Wir müssen ihnen Vertrauen geben, dass ihr Engagement auch wirklich Wirkung hat und dass ihre Stimme zählt. Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much indeed. Let's move on then to the general speakers list, and the first speaker is Mr. Ricardo Carvalho.
Thank you, Chair. Dear colleagues, I would like to welcome this report on strengthening democracies with young people. We fully share one central conviction. Without engaged, informed and responsible young people, democracy is weakened. The report is right to stress that youth participation must not be symbolic. Civic education, digital literacy, the fight against disinformation, and access to culture, employment, and housing are essential conditions for young people to trust institutions and take part in democratic life in a meaningful way. For me and my party, participation means responsibility, not merely the creation of new structures. Young people must be integrated into political parties, parliaments, local authorities and civil society, rather than being channeled into parallel bodies without direct democratic legitimacy. Strengthening youth wings, political training and involvement in existing legislative process is the most solid and credible path forward. However, we do have clear reservations about some proposals. In particular, automatically lowering the voting age to 16 should not be treated as one-size-fits-all solution. Each member state must decide with prudence, taking into account civic maturity, the educational context, and public trust in institutions. What matters most is not the age of voting, but ensuring informed and critical and responsible citizens. It's important to advocate a balanced approach. Rights accompanied by duties, participation accompanied by education, and inclusion accompanied by responsibility. This is how we build resilient, intergenerational, and sustainable democracies. Young people are not only the future of democracy, they are part of its present. It's our responsibility to ensure that this present is built on freedom, responsibility, and trust. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Max Lux.
Dankeschön, Herr Präsident, sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen. Ich finde den vorliegenden Bericht aus ganzem Herzen unterstützenswert, ein Wahlalter abzusenken, junge Menschen in Europa zu beteiligen, auch ein neues Jugendzentrum des Europarates aufzubauen in der Schwarzmeerregion, ist eine gute Sache. Ich glaube, die Stärke unserer Jugendpolitik bemisst sich aber an zwei weiteren zentralen Fragen. Erstens an der Frage, ob unsere nationalen Regierungen auch bereit sind, das nötige Geld aufzubringen für die Jugendarbeit, die unser Europarat so großartig leistet. Und zweitens aber an der Frage, und das sage ich als Jugendberichterstatter im Ausschuss für politische Angelegenheiten und Demokratie, ob wir es als Politik schaffen, jungen Menschen in Europa wieder Hoffnung in die Zukunft zu geben. Als viele hier im Raum so alt waren wie ich, war, glaube ich, klar, wohin die Richtung geht. Wohlstand, der gewachsen ist, Autokratien, die zu Demokratien wurden, Mauern, die gefallen sind. Und heute erleben wir, dass all das für sehr, sehr viele junge Menschen auf unserem Kontinenten überhaupt nicht mehr selbstverständlich ist. Stattdessen erleben wir, wie Putin den Krieg in den Osten Europas zurückgebracht hat. Und wenn wir nach Westen in die Vereinigten Staaten von Amerika schauen, sehen wir, wie ein immer autokratisch werdender Donald Trump im Schlepptau seiner Tech-Bros Leute wie den Krankenpfleger Alex Pretty von seinen Eisbeamten niederschießen lässt. Wir erleben zunehmend, wie Menschenrechte und Demokratie in Europa eingeschränkt werden. Es gibt nichts Aktuelleres als die Aufforderung von Winston Churchill, ein vereintes Europa entstehen zu lassen, auf der Basis von Demokratie und Menschenrechten. Und ich möchte, dass wir jedem jungen Menschen auf unserem Kontinenten zurufen. Egal, ob du auf Grönland, in Donetsk oder in Budapest lebst. Kein Donald Trump, kein Wladimir Putin, kein Autokrat wird dich kleinkriegen und wir sorgen dafür, dass du eine gute Zukunft in Freiheit auf diesem Kontinenten hast. Vielen Dank.
Thank you. The next speaker is Baroness Therese Coffey.
There is much in this resolution and recommendations to support, including the participation of youth in the Council of Europe and the Assembly, and to recognise youth civil society volunteering and community engagement. We should consider further activity even in this Assembly, for example, when committees form. Instead of it being the oldest member chairing at the start, why not make it the youngest member? In the UK, uniformed services, whether the Scouts, Girls Brigade or Army Cadets, are all well-established places and spaces for young people to explore their understanding of a number of issues affecting themselves, each other, and also an opportunity to serve their community. However, I am opposed to paragraph 12 in the resolution and recommendation 5, which is regarding the voting age of 16. I know in 2011 the Assembly adopted support for voting at 16, and I respectfully disagree, which is why I cannot support the resolution in full today. Young people can and do, of course, have political views. I grew up in a politically charged city, Liverpool. The hard-left militant Labour ran the council, and to stay in power and avoid bankruptcy, Labour councillors made all its employees redundant, including my parents, who were teachers. Every teacher was made redundant. Seeing how my city was being destroyed, I joined the Conservative Party at the youngest age possible at 16 and started my civic and political education. For me, it was clear, but that was because I faced an extremist party running my city. Now, there are many things you cannot do in the UK until you become an adult, recognising the greater understanding that people acquire as they mature. I'm particularly concerned thinking about social media. Getting good quality information matters. I've heard a lot about the concerns of extreme influencers, misinformation and fake news distribution, but through social media. It's the primary source of information for young people. I think it's really important that we fix the civic education first, knowing the consequences of how you vote for your country, for your community, your family, and you as an individual are vital. That is why I cannot support the resolution fully today.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Benoit Lutken.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, chers collègues. Le renforcement de la démocratie avec et pour les jeunes est un enjeu crucial pour l'avenir de l'Europe. Donner des responsabilités à la jeunesse, c'est également la meilleure façon d'investir pour l'avenir de nos démocraties et l'État de droit. La participation des jeunes au processus démocratique est essentielle pour garantir que leur voix soit entendue et que leurs intérêts soient pris en compte. Chers collègues, agissons peut-être d'abord au niveau local. En effet, au niveau local, les jeunes sont souvent les premiers à être touchés par les décisions politiques, mais ils sont également souvent les moins bien représentés. C'est pourquoi il est essentiel de mettre en place des mécanismes pour encourager notamment leur participation concrète, tels que les budgets participatifs. C'est d'ailleurs relevé, et je m'en réjouis, dans le rapport. Les budgets participatifs permettent aux jeunes de prendre part à la décision sur l'utilisation des fonds publics et de contribuer à la définition des priorités de leur communauté de vie. C'est un moyen efficace de renforcer la démocratie locale et de promouvoir l'engagement citoyen des jeunes, de les impliquer également, de les confronter positivement et de leur offrir des responsabilités concrètes. Dans un lien avec le monde culturel et artistique, ces budgets permettent également aux jeunes de se réapproprier leurs espaces de vie. Nous devons également soutenir bien sûr toute une série d'initiatives qui visent à renforcer la participation des jeunes à la vie démocratique, tels que le conseil de jeunes, les forums de discussion et les projets de volontariat. Mesdames, Messieurs, concernant l'abaissement de l'âge du droit de vote, ne croyons pas ici que c'est la panacée, que ça réglerait tous les problèmes de participation des jeunes. C'est faux. On l'a vu dans notre pays, en Belgique, où on a baissé l'âge du droit de vote pour les élections européennes. Ça n'a pas amélioré la participation des jeunes. Si on devait aller vers ce type d'abaissement, il faut une formation, il faut également peut-être d'abord le faire au niveau local. L'avenir de l'Europe, c'est garantir aux jeunes d'être des acteurs clés de la démocratie, d'être des vrais partenaires de la jeunesse. Merci à notre collègue Gazarian pour l'excellent travail réalisé. Je vous remercie.
Thank you. The next speaker is Victoria Tiblon.
Thank you, Mr. President. This report is right about one thing. Democracy cannot be renewed without young people. But participation without limits is not responsibility. It is delegation without accountability. Political formation does not begin with the state programs or classroom activism. It begins at home. Families, not governments, are the first educators in democracy. Schools must teach how democracy works, the rule of law, free elections, separation of powers, not promote political positions. When education becomes ideology, democracy becomes weaker. Some on the left seem to believe that disengagement can be solved by more political messaging from the state. History teaches us the opposite. Democracy grows through pluralism, not instruction. Young people do not need to be mobilized, they need to be trusted. Real engagement comes from voluntary participation, local responsibility, work, entrepreneurship, and civil society, not from being spoken for. If we truly want shared responsibility, we must stop using young people to validate political agendas. Democracy is strengthened when the state sets limits, families pass on values, and young citizens are free to decide for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Zita Gurmai.
Mr. President, dear colleagues, for too long, youth participation in politics has been a photo-op rather than a power-sharing experience. Today's generation is no longer satisfied with symbolic consultation. They want real influence, and rightly so. Just as previous generations fought to give women an equal voice, we must now empower young people as equal partners of democracy. Across Europe and beyond, youth are already doing the work of democratic renewal. In Bulgaria, tens of thousands of young people mobilized against corruption and helped bring down a government. In Serbia, students led mass protest after a deadly infrastructure collapse in Novi Sad, demanding accountability for corruption and negligence. In Nepal, young people took the street to defend freedom of expression when social media bans were proposed. In Morocco, thousands of young citizens mobilized against social injustice under the banner of a new generation demanding dignity and fairness. These are not signs of disengagement. They are proof that young people are often the first to defend democratic values when institutions fail. Their movement, decentralized, tech-savvy, and value-driven, are reshaping civic life and reminding us that democracy is not inherited. It must be renewed. We have begun to recognize this. In 2025, the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities adopted the European Charter on Youth Participation. Our Assembly has called for lowering voting age, removing barriers to youth activism, and opening parliaments and council to young voices. But principles are not enough. Empowering young people is not a gesture of goodwill. It is a democratic imperative. Democracy grows stronger when power is shared. Let us move beyond tokenism. Let us institutionalize youth participation from civic education to decision-making. The resilience of our democracy depends on it because the future is already knocking at the door. And thanks for the Maltese presidency to do the utmost for the youth, and thanks for our great rapporteurs.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ms. Bianca Eugenia Gavrila. No? Okay. In that case, the next speaker we have will be Ms. Naomi Kakia.
Chair, some of us here will be familiar with the current social media trend where people look back and share photos of what they were doing in 2016. 10 years ago, I was a 21-year-old student actively involved in youth politics in Malta. At the time, one of the key issues on the youth agenda was Vote 16. We really believed that as young citizens, we weren't asking for much, just for the recognition that we should be the authors of our own destiny. Because lowering the voting age is not simply about allowing more people into the polling booth on election day. It goes far beyond that. It makes us rethink how we engage with young people and to create genuine spaces for meaningful dialogue. 2 years later, we succeeded. And today, as a young politician, I want to see this shift from merely speaking about youth participation to embracing shared responsibility. For years, we have paid lip service to the concept of giving young people a seat at the table. I myself have attended countless seminars and conferences on this topic. And while the intention may have been noble, it's not really gotten us to where we need to be today when we look at the wider picture. We are now recognizing that participation alone is not enough. It is not enough to consult young people at the margins. In Malta, if you are 16, you can stand for local elections. You can even be elected as mayor. We have established a youth advisory forum, a committee of our cabinet of ministers chaired by our prime minister, where young people are consulted directly on matters of national importance. We are consulting children and young people on our country's vision for the next 25 years, on what they want to see in our national parks. And that gives real meaning to our decision-making and to our policies. And our experience has shown that when you give them space and trust, young people will step up. So thank you, Sona, for your recommendations and your report, and I hope young people keep demanding to have a seat at the table. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Madame Marie-Christine Dalloz.
Une enquête récente faite en France auprès des 18-30 ans montre que si les jeunes peuvent éprouver de la défiance envers les politiques, ils sont loin d'être dépolitisés. Ils s'informent, il est vrai majoritairement à travers les réseaux sociaux, ils s'engagent dans le sport, dans l'aide humanitaire, la culture, ils signent des pétitions en ligne. Je le constate régulièrement lors d'interventions dans les collèges sur le rôle du député. Les élèves sont très intéressés et pourtant, ils votent peu. Un tiers de ces 18-30 ans explique l'abstention des jeunes par un manque de confiance. Un quart d'entre eux pensent que leur vote n'a aucun impact. Face à ce constat, le projet de résolution que nous examinons apporte quelques réponses. Son point 9 met en avant la nécessité de développer une instruction civique. En effet, c'est indispensable. Mais cette éducation à la citoyenneté ne doit pas se contenter de rappeler le rôle des institutions, les principes de la démocratie, elle doit également intégrer une culture numérique. Alors que 51% des jeunes ne regardent que des informations pas toujours vérifiées, il est indispensable de les sensibiliser au risque des fausses informations et des manipulations de l'opinion publique. L'éducation à la citoyenneté active est également essentielle. Le succès des conseils municipaux des jeunes ou du Parlement des enfants, organisé à l'Assemblée nationale française, montre que l'engagement des jeunes est possible. Toutes les initiatives qui vont en ce sens doivent être soutenues. Mais il faudrait réfléchir à des initiatives touchant aussi les jeunes actifs, les primo-votants. Les institutions paraissent souvent bien lointaines pour les jeunes, tout simplement par méconnaissance. Le rôle des jeunes parlementaires pourrait être plus important en direction des jeunes de nos pays respectifs qui ne sont pas représentés. Le réseau des jeunes parlementaires de l'APOSCE a organisé une série de tables rondes dans les pays membres pour échanger avec des jeunes. Une proposition de texte a été présentée lors de la dernière session à partir de ces retours d'expérience. Cela répond pleinement au projet de résolution qui insiste sur le partage avec les jeunes. Merci.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Madame Louise Morel.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais d'abord saluer la qualité du travail mené par Madame la rapporteure. Je partage votre enthousiasme sur ce sujet et vos conclusions. La question que nous examinons aujourd'hui est finalement comment associer réellement les jeunes, qu'ils aient d'ailleurs l'âge de voter ou non, à la décision publique. Cette question est d'autant plus fondamentale que dans nombre de nos pays, on observe une abstention importante des jeunes lorsque le vote n'est pas obligatoire. Or, une génération qui ne vote pas, c'est une génération qui n'est pas représentée, elle est tenue à l'écart de la décision politique et c'est d'autant plus préoccupant dans des sociétés européennes parfois vieillissantes où le rapport de force entre générations devient de fait structurellement déséquilibré. Je voudrais partager quelques réflexions qui font écho au travail mené ici. D'abord, une question de vocabulaire. On parle souvent de la jeunesse, or je préférerais le terme des jeunesses, les jeunesses, parce qu'elle est très différente d'un pays à l'autre, au sein d'un même pays aussi, selon l'âge, le lieu de vie, et je crois que c'est important de le rappeler. Ensuite, revenir sur le cadre du rapport qui dit comment on passe de la participation à la responsabilité partagée. Je crois que nous devons aller plus loin dans l'association des jeunes, en particulier pour les décisions qui engagent notre pays pour des décennies. Je prends l'exemple des choix énergétiques et particulièrement, par exemple, du nucléaire. Est-il légitime parfois que sur ce sujet, il y a une surreprésentation des générations qui décident, alors que les montants engagés et l'aspect opérationnel de ces choix seront assumés par les générations futures. Je crois que nous devrions avoir des avis à minima consultatifs sur les sujets qui engagent nos pays pour des décennies, voire parfois parfois des avis avec une valeur réellement contraignante. Enfin, je voudrais revenir sur le sujet de la représentation des jeunes dans la vie politique. Il ne s'agit pas de remettre en cause le suffrage universel qui donne la légitimité démocratique, mais de reconnaître qu'une démocratie est plus forte lorsqu'elle reflète la diversité de la société. Enfin, je voudrais partager une anecdote personnelle. J'ai été élue à 26 ans et j'ai souvent entendu de collèges plus âgés « Je ne suis pas d'accord avec toi, mais mes enfants pensent exactement comme toi. Cela dit quelque chose de nos institutions. Écouter les plus jeunes d'entre nous, c'est aussi entendre ce que la société dira parfois dans 10 ou 15 ans et peut-être prendre un peu d'avance sur elle. » Je vous remercie.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Coleman Brenner, but I see he is absent. So we will move on then to our next speaker, Ms. Gökçe. I'm afraid your mic is off.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Chers collègues, je tiens à remercier Madame la rapporteure pour ce rapport excellent. Je voudrais saisir cette occasion pour évoquer un bon exemple concernant la participation des jeunes à la politique. Lors du dernier congrès de l'organisation de jeunesse de CHP, il y avait des gens en gilet rouge dont je faisais partie. Qui étaient ces gilets rouges? Sur un côté de leur gilet était inscrit leur fonction actuelle et de l'autre, la fonction qu'ils occupaient dans le passé au sein de l'organisation de jeunesse. Par exemple, d'un côté député, de l'autre président de l'organisation de jeunesse. Par exemple, d'un côté maire, de l'autre dirigeant local de la jeunesse. Chers collègues, les jeunes ont beaucoup lutté pour obtenir une représentation. Mais pendant ce congrès, nous étions plus nombreux que jamais. Parce que l'une des raisons qui a fait du CHP le premier parti de Turquie aux dernières élections, c'est le fait d'avoir accordé aux jeunes non seulement des quotas, mais de réelles responsabilités. Et d'ici, je voudrais saluer un ami et rendre hommage à une autre. L'un de ces gilets rouges portait l'inscription secrétaire général de la jeunesse d'un côté et maire d'Avcılar de l'autre. Il s'agit de Utku Caner Çaykara. Il est en prison depuis des mois. Il est incarcéré avec Zeydan Karalar, Rıza Akpolat, Oya Tekin et Kadir Aydar. Au moment même où nous parlons, ils comparaissent devant le juge. Je leur transmets d'ici toute ma solidarité. Une autre de ces gilets rouges, d'un côté, il était écrit « Présidente de la jeunesse de Manisa », de l'autre, « Maire de Şehzadeler ». Nous avons perdu Gülşah Durbay le mois dernier, à un très jeune âge, des suites d'un cancer du côlon. Je salue la mémoire de ma chère amie avec une grande émotion. Je vous remercie.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Baroness Ruthent.
I thank the rapporteur for this report. It reminds us that democracy is not a relic we inherit intact. It is a living system that endures only if each generation is allowed to reshape it. The Council of Europe was born out of catastrophe. A generation that had seen fascism and war did not simply defend democracy, they designed it. They built institutions meant to outlast them, and that act of democratic imagination is a core reason why European democracy has survived. Today, a new generation faces different, but no less existential challenges: climate breakdown, digital power, inequality, polarisation, and indeed war. They are asking to help design the next systems, not just inherit ours. Yet too often we invite young people to the table, but limit what they can influence. We listen, we take notes, and then we keep control. This has to change, and it has to start here with us, not with another visit to a youth centre, but with how PACE and the Council of Europe actually work. We need to examine our committee structures, our reports, our urgent debates, and change how we operate, here and now, rather than repeating the same processes and congratulating ourselves for the occasional consultation. If democracy is a living thing, young people must be its co-architects, not its spectators. That means real influence, real responsibility, and a willingness from us to loosen our grip on power. The generation that built this organisation trusted itself to design democracy for the future. We must trust today's young people to do the same. Because if we do not let them help redesign democracy, we cannot expect them to defend it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mr. Yunus Emre.
Dear colleagues, let me begin by thanking the rapporteur for this highly timely and much-needed report. At a moment when debates on democratic backsliding are intensifying across our continent, this report reminds us of something essential. Democracy cannot be sustained by institutions alone. It must be sustained by people, and especially by young people. For decades after the Second World War, when democracy became firmly rooted in Europe, each new generation lived better than the previous one, better education, better jobs, and higher living standards. This shared experience helped to build trust in democracy itself. Today, however, many young people face a very different reality. For the first time, a generation expects that it may not earn more than its parents, may not have access to better housing, and may not enjoy improved living conditions. This is unprecedented and deeply dangerous. This growing dissatisfaction is not politically neutral. It erodes democratic legitimacy and creates fertile ground for extremism. When democracy no longer delivers social progress, it struggles to maintain public trust. We must therefore be clear. This challenge cannot be addressed by rhetoric or participation mechanisms alone. It requires strong social policies and a determined fight against inequality. Democracy must once again become a system that offers real opportunities, social mobility, and dignity, particularly to younger generations. Expecting young people to defend democracy without improving their life prospects is simply unrealistic. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Pedro Miguel Aces Barba.
Parlamentarias y parlamentarios de Europa, con el saludo respetuoso del pueblo de México. Fortalecer las democracias con las y los jóvenes exige hablar con honestidad, pero sobre todo con retos importantes. También reconocer los avances que ya están ocurriendo, porque la democracia, en el fondo, se parece a la juventud. Nace de la idea de que lo injusto puede cambiarse y de que lo más importante es poner encima lo más urgente. En México se está viviendo una etapa especialmente relevante. En 2023 se transformó la Constitución para reducir la edad mínima para ser diputada o diputado de los 21 a los 18 años y para integrar el gabinete presidencial como ministro de los 30 a los 25 años. Para abrir formalmente la puerta para que la juventud sea parte del poder público, en 2024 las personas de 18 a 29 años presentaron casi 25 millones en el padrón electoral mexicano. Esto quiere decir que si la juventud se moviliza, hoy puede definir el rumbo de cualquier país. En el proceso electoral 2023-2024, quienes votaron por primera vez con 18 años registraron una participación arriba del 60%. El reto es convertir ese impulso en corresponsabilidad sostenida. La Unión Interparlamentaria reporta 3.4% de diputadas y diputados de 30 años o menos en el mundo. Pero también muestra un dato esperanzador. 42.8 tiene 45 años o menos, lo que revela una renovación general que está en marcha. El mensaje es claro, la juventud no necesita permiso para participar, necesita instituciones que la integren, que se eliminen todas las barreras y que compartan responsabilidad. En ese puente entre participación y corresponsabilidad, México quiere dialogar siempre con Europa para construir democracias más abiertas y cada día más modernas. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Tone Wilhelmsen-Trøen.
Thank you, Mr. President, dear colleagues. I would like to start by thanking the rapporteur, Ms. Gazarian, and Ms. Gardini for their important work. This is a strong and timely report. At the same time, we must be careful not to congratulate ourselves too quickly on youth participation. Democracy is not strengthened simply because young people are present. It is strengthened when they are able to speak openly and have real influence over decisions. Youth engagement is not limited to formal political participation. It is about participation in all parts of society. It is just as important that young people take on leadership roles, engage in volunteering, and participate in civil society and organizations as it is that they enter party politics. Many of us in this assembly became politically active because our engagement was sparked by a single issue that mattered deeply to us. Young people today deserve the same opportunity to care, to speak out, and to act without fear. This is why paragraph 7.5 of this report is so important. Many young people experience hate speech, harassment, and intimidation when they take part in public debate. As a result, many choose silence over engagement, not because they lack opinions, but because the cost of speaking out is so high. We must recognize that the ability of young people to speak openly, debate loudly, disagree, and test ideas is just as vital to democracy as their participation in youth councils, political parties, or other formal structures. If we truly want young people to move from participation to shared responsibility, we must also take shared responsibility for creating the conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sir Edward Lee.
Mr. Vice President, I support what my colleague Therese Coffey says on votes at 16. Now, the report is right to stress the importance of young people understanding democratic institutions. We all agree. It does not sufficiently distinguish between neutral civil education, the responsibility of the state and its educational partners, and normative political instruction, the responsibility of non-state political actors in a free society. This distinction that is crucial if trust in democratic systems is to be sustained across generations. Too often, programs framed as, quote, informing young people about democracy risk becoming vehicles for promoting a narrow range of approved liberal establishment views. Instead, we should set a clear goal of equipping young people to understand, interrogate, and ultimately scrutinize political authority. A healthy democracy requires exposure to disagreement. That includes views that are unpopular or upsetting to the liberal political class. Yet the report appears to assume that democratic education can proceed without confronting the danger of ideological conformity. By treating political values as a settled and uncontested, the report risks presenting democracy as a finished moral project. In reality, it is a vibrant and living system shaped by conflict, compromise, and the constant negotiation of competing interests. Young people are still in a state of forming their own identities, sometimes trying out new ones and discarding them several times over. That is natural, and we should not, as society, impose our views on them. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ms. Yulia Ovchinnikova.
Thank you very much, dear Mr. President, dear colleagues. Sona, my congratulations. Thank you for your wonderful work. And today I'm honored to speak about the role of young people in the strengthening democracy. topic is deeply personal for me as well, as I'm sure every one of you. My professional journey began in inclusive and courage spaces of youth activism. And I started as youth activist with the clear belief that young people must not only be heard, but must have real influence over the decisions that shape their lives. 14 years ago, I created the youth organization which initiated the Day of Europe in the east of Ukraine. This was very seriously a day when we invited all international volunteers and cherished European youth in east part of our country. Now this territory under the occupation. So today as parliamentarian, I carry these lessons with me. Democracy must be co-created with next generation, not designed for them without them. We must pay attention and do all the best in all the civic education, working with the patriotic values and involve young leaders to the whole process, to the parliamentary work, to the work, the huge cooperation with government, to share our European values and our future. And for generations, young people have been the forefront of social and political change. Their energy, courage, and creativity are not just assets. They're essential for democratic resilience. From climate action to anti-corruption initiatives, youth-led movements continue their imagined democratic engagement. And of course, young people are not merely the leaders of tomorrow. They are partners in democracy today. And democracy cannot function without them. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Joseph O'Reilly.
President, as I rise to speak on this excellent report, I am proud to have been involved in youth participation projects, bringing youth organisations and individuals from Ireland here to the hemicycle in Strasbourg and to a subsequent youth conference in Rome. The late great Baroness Massey from the UK and Miss Elena Bonotti from Italy were centrally involved then too. We need a well-informed, motivated, idealistic, active youth as a bulwark against racism and xenophobia, and to preserve the democratic values. My personal view on the voting age is that 17 might be a more reasonable place to introduce votes for young people, to lower from 18 to 17. We have all heard, that's a personal view, not a party one, we have all heard repeatedly that young people are the future of our democracies. However, these young people are not just future leaders of our nations and our continent, they are the citizens and leaders of today. They do not only vote, they are often the catalysts of innovation, the leaders in civic engagement, and the backbone of major political movements. Unfortunately, however, young people face real barriers to political participation. These challenges can be legal, economical, social, or a combination of all three. And add to the fact that the younger generation must navigate the modern digital age, where challenges such as misinformation and disinformation are abundant. Yet, despite this, across Europe and the globe, young people continue to lead, and we need them there. The question before us is not whether young people care about democracy, it is whether we are prepared to involve them. To strengthen our democracy must work with youth, not simply work for them. They must be involved centrally. Thank you, President.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Pavlo Bakonets.
Dear members of the Assembly, dear rapporteur, thank you for this excellent report. Dear representatives of democratic countries, the fact that our Ukrainian delegation is working here in this hall today is thanks to Ukrainian youth. More than 10 years ago, young people from Ukraine stood up for the European future of Ukraine. They became the first victims of Ukraine's modern struggle for European future. Later, young Ukrainians were among the first to join the Ukrainian army to stop Russian invasion. And since February 2022, thousands of young men and women were defended Ukraine and all of Europe from full-scale Russian invasion in Ukraine. Because of this youth, it's safe here today in Strasbourg. There are no Russian tanks, missiles, and drones here. That is why young people are already a real guarantee of Europe's security. While we are working here in this warm and safe hall, Ukrainian youth are fighting on the front line. Many of them are in captivity. Many are missing. Many have given their lives, unfortunately, so that Ukraine and Europe can have peace. In my mind, future of Europe, of Ukraine, which I represent here, depends on societies in which young people are active in local political life, in local governments, and they should have opportunities to feel included in process decision-making, like we have in Ukraine. And thank you all for support of Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Yuri Kamelchuk.
Thank you, dear Chairman, dear colleagues. This report delivers an uncomfortable truth. Too often we confuse youth participation with decoration. We create platforms, hold consultations, take photos, and leave young people without real influence. And then we act surprised by distrust, radicalization, and disengagement. We must move from consultation to shared responsibility. That means one thing: young people must have not only the right to speak, but real mechanism to shape decisions that determine their lives. First, political participation. We should consider lowering the voting age to 16, backed by strong civic education and practical channels of influence, from youth councils to participatory youth budgeting. Second, the digital dimension. Young people live in an information environment where disinformation and online violence have become tools or political control. Protecting young people's right online is not optional. It's a duty of states. Third, the socio-economic foundation. Without access to affordable housing, education, jobs, and cultural spaces, participation becomes a privilege for a few. Democracy will not hold if young people do not see fairness in it. And the key point: parliaments must stop being spectators. We need laws, budgets, indicators, and regular reporting so that youth participation is not a slogan, but a system that can be measured, audited, and held accountable. If we want a strong Europe, we must build it with young people, not merely about them and not without them. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Madame Beatrice Fresco-Rolfo.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Chers collègues, je ne vais pas m'imiter à des banalités en rappelant qu'il est essentiel de former la génération de citoyens de demain. Renforcer nos démocraties aujourd'hui implique de considérer les jeunes comme des acteurs à part entière. Leur créativité, leur énergie, leur capacité à remettre en question les modèles existants sont des atouts précieux pour rendre nos institutions plus résilientes et adaptées aux défis contemporains. Écouter les idées de la nouvelle génération nous permet de progresser avec eux et d'éviter de rester figés sur des problématiques dépassées, tandis que de nouvelles priorités émergent. Nous sommes élus pour porter l'expérience et les combats de nos générations, mais si nous ignorons la voix des jeunes, nos politiques seront constamment en retard face aux revendications et aux défis de notre époque. Nous risquons ainsi de nous concentrer sur les enjeux d'hier au lieu de préparer ceux de demain. À Monaco, le Conseil national des jeunes permet tout au long de l'année à des jeunes monégasques de travailler en groupe sur des projets concrets accompagnés par la présidente de la Commission éducation, jeunesse et sport et ainsi de finaliser des propositions de résolution. Celles-ci pourront éventuellement inspirer les élus au Conseil national. De même, le Conseil économique, social et environnemental des jeunes constitue une véritable passerelle entre le monde éducatif et le secteur professionnel. Depuis sa création en 2007, près de 500 lycéens y ont participé, découvrant le fonctionnement des institutions, développant leur esprit critique et apportant des idées novatrices sur des enjeux de société. Typiquement, cette initiative permet aux jeunes, qui ont souvent moins de 16 ans, de présenter leurs projets en séance plénière et lorsque leurs propositions sont adoptées, de voir leurs vœux portés à l'attention des autorités monégasques. Ces initiatives montrent qu'impliquer les jeunes dans la vie démocratique est un investissement dans l'avenir de notre démocratie elle-même. Merci à notre rapporteur pour cet excellent rapport.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Ms. Aurora Floridia.
Grazie Presidente, colleghe e colleghi. Innanzitutto ringrazio la collega Gazarian per il suo eccellente report che evidenzia la necessità di coinvolgere attivamente i giovani nella vita democratica europea, passando dai semplici meccanismi consultivi a una vera corresponsabilità intergenerazionale nei processi decisionali. I giovani sono già protagonisti del cambiamento in molteplici ambiti, dall'attivismo climatico e sociale fino alle iniziative civiche digitali. Ciò nonostante, la partecipazione giovanile è spesso ostacolata da barriere istituzionali, da una diffusa sfiducia verso la politica e le istituzioni e viceversa, e siamo onesti, anche da un certo grado di diffidenza da parte del mondo adulto nei loro confronti. Il coinvolgimento dei giovani rimane spesso limitato a forme simboliche e di facciata, prive di un reale potere decisionale, alimentando sentimenti di frustrazione, disillusione e disaffezione. Il Consiglio d'Europa sta compiendo un passo in avanti importante in questo ambito, integrando le nuove generazioni nei processi decisionali attraverso un modello di co-gestione del settore giovanile, ponendosi come modello di riferimento da seguire. Lo testimonia ad esempio il lavoro svolto sul diritto all'abitare. Un altro esempio dato dalla loro partecipazione attiva all'interno del Consiglio d'Europa sul diritto a vivere in un ambiente sano, pulito e sostenibile. I loro contributi sono preziosi e la tutela dell'ambiente rappresenta per loro una priorità fondamentale. Cogliere e accogliere i loro contributi significa rafforzare la fiducia dei giovani nelle istituzioni, un compito che non possiamo fallire. Per questo impegnarci, per esempio, con rigore per il riconoscimento di questo fondamentale diritto significa non solo rispondere alle sfide ambientali e climatiche, ma anche trasmettere loro principi di coerenza, responsabilità e proattività rispetto alle sfide che vanno colte ora. Grazie.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ms. Danuta Jaziowiecka.
Thank you. Mr. President, dear colleagues, the report makes it clear that the future of democracy in Europe depends on whether young people are treated not merely as a passive recipients of consultation. Dialogue is not enough, but as a full partners in public decision-making. This issue today is no longer visibility, but influence. Rebuilding young people's trust in public institutions requires a shift from declarations to action. Democracy will not be strong without young people. They will endure only if they are co-created with them. At the same time, we must not overlook the reality of aging European society. Young people are indispensable to sharing Europe's shared future together with seniors for better life of all. In Poland, youth councils operate at municipal and regional level. The strategies for development of young people are being implemented on local and regional level. I think this is the best way to prepare them for politics. Alexandra Schuss, I will resign from election list for young people. I just do it. But they have to be prepared for it. They have to be responsible persons. Elizabeth, you are right. There is no gap for young people. There's future for them and future for us of them. Thank you, the reporters, for a great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Vladimir Zordovich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Democracy is not a playground, it's a responsibility. But responsibility cannot exist without fairness. Across Europe, young people are encouraged to participate, to speak up, to engage. Yet many share the same frustration. Responsibility is demanded while real authority is withheld. Young people are ready to take responsibility as students in Serbia. What they reject is responsibility without trust, without clear rules, and without influence over the future. Strong democracies are built on clear rules, equal standards, and real accountability, matched with real authority and clear mandates. This is where participation becomes institutional responsibility. When young people know that effort matters, that rules are fair, and that responsibility brings influence, they do not disengage. They step forward. Strengthening democracy with young people means not lowering expectations, but trusting new generation with both obligation and vision, because only fair system can demand responsibility, and only responsible generation can shape the future of democracy. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Amayan Kandan.
Thank you, Ms. Gazarian, for your valuable work. We all agree here that young people should be more involved in democratic life in our countries and across Europe, and this report rightly highlights the vitality of youth participation. We must not forget that democracy is not only about having elections. Sound youth participation clearly comprises of involvement in all social, political, economic and cultural decision-making processes. In the draft resolution, I quote, "Assembly emphasizes that youth participation must evolve from consultation to shared responsibility, ensuring that young people have both the right and the means of influence decisions that affect them." For instance, the Youth Delegate Initiative of the Congress of local and regional authorities is a good example of promoting the participation of young people in public life and in the decision-making process. At this point, I would like to remind you that unfortunately, Turkish Cypriot youth neither the right nor the means to participate in any of the Council of Europe's programs. As the report underlines, young people who have not accessed institutional channels for participation must be reached and their involvement must be ensured. The Cyprus problem, unfortunately, still continues, but this should not prevent the Turkish Cypriot youth to get involved with the European and international initiatives and programs offered for young people. Like all youth, the Turkish Cypriot youth deserves a formula, a solution that includes them, empowers them, and allows them to take part in the Council of Europe's activities like their Greek Cypriot friends. I can assure you that the Turkish Cypriot youth is ready to take responsibility in political, social, economic and cultural decision-making processes to shape their society and their future. However, first we need to provide the Turkish Cypriot youth the opportunity to participate. Once again, I would like to congratulate the rapporteur for the clear roadmap presented for European youth. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Sigurður Helgi Pálmason.
Mr. President, across this great continent, we should be thinking, what kind of Europe will we leave to the next generation? But perhaps the better question is, what kind of generation are we preparing to inherit Europe? History teaches us something essential. Strong democracies are not built by governments alone. They are built by citizens who believe that freedom is worth defending, responsibility is worth carrying, and participation is a fundamental right, not a favor granted by the state. Young people do not need to be sheltered from democracy. They need to be trusted with it. The role of Parliament is not to manage every outcome, but to protect the conditions in which initiative, creativity, and civic virtue can flourish. When young people are given real opportunity, they do not retreat from responsibility, they rise to it. Democracy does not survive because it's guaranteed. It survives because it's chosen again and again. by citizens who understand that freedom requires effort and rights come with obligations. The strength of our institutions ultimately reflects the character of the citizens who sustain them. Democracy does not inherit itself. Each generation must be taught, challenged, and trusted to carry it forward. To the rapporteur, thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Bernadetta Coma.
Chers collègues, je souhaite exprimer mon plein soutien à ce rapport. Il répond à un enjeu fondamental pour nos démocraties, permettre aux jeunes de participer réellement, durablement et de manière structurée à la prise de décisions publiques. Aujourd'hui, beaucoup de jeunes se sentent encore exclus des processus décisionnels et peu représentés par nos institutions. Le rapport affirme avec justesse que l'avenir de nos démocraties dépend de l'implication pleine et entière des jeunes, non plus comme des participants consultés ponctuellement, mais comme de véritables acteurs de la gouvernance démocratique. Il nous invite ainsi à passer d'une participation symbolique à une responsabilité réellement partagée. Dans ce contexte, les parlements ont un rôle central à jouer. La principauté d'Andorre, malgré sa petite taille, est pleinement concernée par ces enjeux. Comme dans de nombreux pays, les jeunes font face à des défis importants, notamment en matière de logement, d'emploi et de la participation à la vie publique. Je tiens toutefois à souligner que des initiatives concrètes existent déjà, en cohérence avec les principes de ce rapport. Des espaces de dialogue ont été mis en place, tels que le Conseil des enfants à l'école primaire, organisé dans les mairies des 7 paroisses, ainsi que le Conseil des jeunes au niveau de l'enseignement secondaire qui se tient au Parlement. Par ailleurs, le Parlement, avec le soutien de la délégation andorrane à l'OSCE, a encouragé la participation de jeunes à des débats sur des sujets clés comme le logement, l'innovation technologique ou la transition énergétique. De plus, le Forum national de la jeunesse joue un rôle important pour promouvoir l'engagement des jeunes dans la société. Les partis politiques disposent en outre des sections jeunesse et notre ministère des Affaires étrangères impulse aussi leur participation internationalement. Merci beaucoup pour votre attention.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Albana Vokshi.
Thank you, dear Chair, dear colleagues. I thank the rapporteurs for the report and for raising this vital issue. In Albania, students and young people made history. In the 1990s, they stood up and brought down a communist dictatorship. History teaches us what the power of youth is. When youth rise, regimes fall. When youth leave, democracy erodes. Today, Albania is facing youth exodus. According to Eurostat, in the last decade only, 1.1 million Albanians left to the EU countries. 78% of Albanians, asylum seekers, are under the age 34. 80% of university students, 59% of high school graduates, 95% of those studying abroad want to leave and not come back. The latest EBRD transition report, published a few weeks ago, confirms this alarm. Albania has lost 40% of its population through immigration, and 1/4 of the highly educated citizens have left. This is not economic crisis, this is democratic crisis. Because when young people leave, they do not only take their skills with them, but their voices, their votes, and the power to hold institutions accountable. The result is deeply troubling. Elections in our countries are increasingly decided by those who remain, not by those who will lead the future. In Albania's last elections, over 42% of voters were pensioners. Young people leave because they lack hope, because they feel politically excluded, unrepresented, because public administration is captured by patronage network, not merit, because they cannot afford housing, cannot find decent job, they cannot face high living costs, growing youth poverty. Youth emigration and population ages are now direct threat to Albania's economic and social stability. This assembly has given the answer. If we want young people to stay, we must give them dignity, opportunity, and real voice. So they do not leave the country, but they can be heard and contribute for the future of the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Kat Eccles.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair and colleagues. Today I rise to strongly support one particular aspect of this report, and that is extending voting rights to 16 and 17-year-olds. This report underscores a simple but powerful truth. Democracy is stronger when young people are not just consulted, but fully empowered as equal partners in shaping political, social, economic and cultural life. And this report reminds us that while progress has been made across Europe, youth participation remains uneven, fragmented and hindered by persistent barriers, including inequality, precarious employment and limited access to civic spaces. Many young people feel excluded from the decision-making process and perceive institutions as distant or unrepresentative. And these realities should serve as a call to action. When young people feel disconnected from democracy, democracy itself is weakened. Lowering the voting age is one of the most direct and meaningful steps we can take to address this, and it moves youth participation from consultation to shared responsibility, giving young people not just a voice, but real influence and agency, something this report explicitly frames as central to renewing and strengthening democratic legitimacy. And we're not alone in moving in this direction. My own government in the UK has committed to lowering the voting age before the next national election, and Scotland and Wales already enfranchise 16 and 17-year-olds. And across Europe, Austria, Belgium, Germany and Malta have successfully extended voting rights in various elections. 16-year-olds work, they pay taxes, they contribute to society. And as the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer said, if you're paying in, you should have the opportunity to say what your money is spent on. So today, I wholeheartedly support votes at 16. It's consistent with the European democratic principles, backed by international evidence, and grounded in a vision of a healthier and more inclusive democracy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I move on to our next, I'm afraid, final speaker, who is Ms. Maria Nefeli Chatsioanidou.
Dear colleagues, dear rapporteur, as a young parliamentarian from Greece, I strongly welcome this report and commend the rapporteur for addressing one of the most challenging issues of our political environment, how we ensure that young people are not only heard, but are actually generally trusted, empowered and involved. This report reminds us of a fundamental truth. Youth participation is not a trend, not a concession, it is a democratic obligation. Across Europe, young people are engaging in political life through movements, local initiatives, digital platforms and institutional pathways. They're responding to crises, social, economic, environmental, not with apathy, but with action. Yet, as the report rightly underlines, participation alone is not enough if it remains fragile, tokenistic or conditional. Too often, young people are welcomed in theory, but silenced in practice. Their ideas are praised, but their influence is limited. Their presence is encouraged, but their legitimacy is questioned. I know this reality personally. Young politicians are still too often met with skepticism, labeled as inexperienced, emotional, or unrealistic. But let us be clear. Dismissing young voices does not safeguard stability. It undermines democratic credibility. I want to stress this. When institutions fail to create meaningful space for young people, others will fill that vacuum, sometimes with disinformation, polarization, or exclusion. And this is why the Council of Europe has a crucial role to play. We must protect the civic and political space for youth participation, ensure access to decision-making, and support youth-led initiatives with real resources and long-term commitment. And let me be clear. Advocating for youth participation does not mean promoting young people simply because they are young. But we do need young people that through cooperation and dialogue with older generation can bring renewal, resilience and a shared sense of responsibility for the future. And if we take this process seriously, we will not only strengthen youth engagement, but democracy itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid now I do have to interrupt the list of speakers. We've just gone past 11:45. The speeches of members on the speakers list who have been present during the debate but have not been able to speak may be given to the table office for publication in the official report. Could I remind colleagues that the typewritten text can be submitted electronically if possible, no later than 4 hours after the list of speakers is interrupted. Could I now then call on Ms. Sonia Kazarian, the rapporteur, to reply? You have 3 minutes.
Dear President, dear colleagues, I would like to thank all the speakers for a debate that has been thoughtful, sincere, and at the times rightly challenging. The diversity of views expressed today reflects not division, but the seriousness with which we all approach the future of democratic systems. I would like to thank the committee members. I'd like to thank committee secretariat for the huge amount of work done. What has emerged clearly from the discussion is a shared recognition of one essential truth. Democracy cannot remain credible, resilient, or legitimate if young people experience it only as observers rather than participants. While approaches may differ, there is a broad agreement that disengagement, frustration, and distrust among young people, younger generation, pose a real risk not only to the youth policy, but to the democracy itself. At the same time, we have been reminded of the extraordinary resource that young people represent, their capacity for innovation, their commitment to justice, and their readiness to engage when they are trusted and empowered. The Council of Europe's co-management system stands as a proof that shared responsibility is not an abstract idea, but a effective model. Colleagues, the resolution and recommendation before us do not impose a single model. You are correct. It doesn't have one one-size-fits-all solution. They offer a framework, flexible yet firm in its principle, that respects national contexts while affirming our common democratic values. In closing, this debate today should not mark the end of a discussion, but it should mark the beginning of more consistent action. Supporting young youth participation is not an act of generosity. It is an investment in democratic continuity. It's a choice to strengthen the trust, legitimacy, social cohesion across generations. I therefore invite you, as the member of the youngest parliament, as a member of the Armenian parliament, once as the youngest female MP, to support the text before us and to carry its spirit into our national parliaments, policies and practices, so that democracy is not only protected for young people, but it is built with them. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Could I ask at this point if the chairperson of the committee wishes to speak? No? Yes?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, the Committee of Culture, Science, Education and Media fully supports this report before us, prepared by great clarity by the rapporteur. Throughout 2025, the committee has held hearings and exchanges with young people, youth organizations, academics, parliamentarians, and institutional partners from across Europe. And these discussions were, yes, sometimes challenging, but always illuminating. They confirmed one central message: democracy cannot be renewed without the meaningful and lasting inclusion of young people. We heard both concern and hope. Concern about declining trust in institutions, economic insecurity, barriers to participation and exposure to online harassment and disinformation, but also hope, creativity, and a strong willingness among young people to engage if they are given real opportunities and real responsibility. The recommendations before us are ambitious, but also pragmatic. They call for stronger and permanent youth participation frameworks and for young people to be present where decisions are made at local, national, and European level. One recommendation deserves particular attention: lowering the voting age to 16. This is not a radical experiment, but a tested reform supported by evidence showing that early participation fosters long-term democratic engagement, and at a time when many young people feel decisions are taken about them, without them, this measure sends a clear signal of inclusion and trust. I therefore invite you to support the resolution and recommendation and to take a decisive step towards more inclusive and forward-looking democracy with young people. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That closes the debate then. Let's move on to the resolution. The Committee on Culture, Science, Education and Media has presented a draft resolution, 16308 in the documents, to which 5 amendments have been tabled. They will be taken in the order in which they appear in the compendium. And could I remind you that speeches on amendments are limited to 30 seconds. Any amendment which has been unanimously approved by the committee seized for report shall not be put to the vote in plenary and shall be declared as definitively approved unless 10 or more members of the Assembly object. I understand that the chairperson of the committee wishes to propose that to the Assembly that amendments 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 to the draft resolution, which were unanimously approved by the committee, be declared as definitively approved. Is that so, Chair? Now, if no one objects, I will consider the amendments to be approved, but is there an objection? I see no objections. So, amendments 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 to the draft resolution are therefore approved and will not be called. Let's move on then to the recommendation, which I will find in a moment. We will now proceed to the vote on the draft resolution contained in the same document. A simple majority is required to adopt the resolution. The vote is now open. I can't see that. The vote is closed. I now call for the result to be displayed. And that means that the resolution is adopted. I now move on to the draft recommendation. No amendments have been tabled to this, so we'll now proceed to vote on the draft recommendation contained in the document. A 2/3 majority is required for the recommendation to be adopted, and I now open the vote. Try again. I close the vote. Call for the result to be displayed. And that is clearly a 2/3 majority. I was worrying that my maths might be tested, but clearly not. And therefore, the draft recommendation is adopted. We will now pause for a moment. We're waiting for the Armenian Foreign Minister to arrive.
Dear colleagues, it's my great pleasure to welcome among us Mr. Ararat Mirzoyan, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Armenia. Dear Minister, it is my pleasure to welcome you here in the Hemicycle. You are no stranger to parliamentary life, have served as a member of parliament from 2019 to 2021 as President of the National Assembly of Armenia, and since 2021 you have held the office of Minister for Foreign Affairs. At your time as minister comes at a pivotal moment following the conclusion in August 2025 of a peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan, opening new perspectives for regional peace, which is very important for us as well, of course. The important step coincides with another meaningful milestone. This year, Armenia marks the 25th anniversary of its accession to the Council of Europe, a quarter of a century of commitment to our shared values of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. We look forward to further progress in consolidating the landmark step for peace, and I wish to assure you the full support of the Assembly in this endeavor. And without any further ado, I would like to give it the floor. Thank you very much. Please.
Madam President of the Parliamentary Assembly, Mr. Secretary General, Madam Secretary General of the Parliamentary Assembly, distinguished members of the Parliamentary Assembly, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by extending warm congratulations to you, President Bayer, for assuming the leadership of this august body, and wish you all the success during your tenure. I would also like to express gratitude to you for the opportunity to address this highly respected European agora of democratic debates. And of course, my special thanks to the Secretary General of the Council of Europe, Mr. Alain Berset, for the warm welcome extended to me and my delegation. It is an honor and a privilege to address the Assembly on the occasion of the 25th anniversary of the Republic of Armenia's accession to the Council of Europe. We have gathered to celebrate the valued membership of Armenia in the Council of Europe and to recognize Armenia's remarkable achievements over the recent years in ensuring the rule of law and protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms. This jubilee provides an opportunity to reflect on the path we have traveled together, the challenges faced, the moments of shared resolve, and the achievements made possible through joint efforts. It is also a chance to reflect collectively on today's common challenges and uncertainties, such as hybrid attacks against democracies, including malicious spread of disinformation and weaponization of information, foreign interferences into domestic democratic processes such as elections, last but not least, undermining international law and the erosion of the multilateral system. All of these put our values and principles to the test, and it is our shared responsibility to safeguard them in an increasingly complex and fragile international environment. The 75-year legacy of the Council of Europe as a standard setter of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law empowers the organization to expand its role in countering global democratic backsliding and contributing to the restoration of trust in the international architecture. Distinguished members of the Parliamentary Assembly, since Armenia's accession, the Council of Europe has played a significant role in nurturing hope for democratic values, in their eventual incorporation into the very fabric of Armenian society and statehood. Each reform, each ratified convention, each institutional development has meant not just a technical change, but tangible and practical improvement in the lives of ordinary citizens. Armenia's accession to the European Convention on Human Rights introduced the right to appeal to the European Court of Human Rights, providing a place where citizens can seek justice and fairness when the domestic legal remedies fall short. The abolition of capital punishment guaranteed the fundamental right to life, ensuring that no individual can be sentenced to death. The establishment of the Human Rights Defender institution gave a direct and independent channel to alert about rights violations committed by the state, providing ordinary people with a mechanism to seek restoration of their rights without necessarily going through long court battles. The Venice Commission, through its legal opinions, acted as a watchdog aimed at ensuring that legislative reforms met international standards. The Group of States Against Corruption, the GRECO, provided regular monitoring and pressure to implement transparent anti-bribery laws and promote integrity within government. Accession to the European Charter of Local Self-Government empowered local communities to manage their own affairs with greater autonomy from the central government. Ladies and gentlemen, I named only basic illustrative examples, but of course the list can go on and on. But let us be very frank, and I really hope that this message won't be misunderstood. This process of prescribing reforms from outside could have continued for ages without reaching the finish line, turning Armenia into a democracy, because there was no genuine interest on the level of government. Thus, in Armenia, people changed the government, becoming the driving force behind change and democracy. Madam President, the peaceful democratic revolution marked a turning point in the modern history of our country. After tasting the bitterness of all previous failures, in 2018, I myself walked along hundreds of thousands of my fellow citizens, my sisters and brothers, who filled the streets and cities of Armenia, not with weapons, but with open hands and a fierce, burning belief that we deserved better. Fair and legitimate elections and right to form government through our votes. Open, accountable, and transparent governance. State institutions free from corruption. Social justice. Taxes being spent on building schools and roads for the people, not castles and private estates for oligarchs and corrupt officials. Businesses operating without paying bribes to officials and competing without artificial monopolies. An independent and efficient judiciary. And we proved that our nation can choose its own destiny. Since 2018, Armenia has implemented extensive reforms. Our achievements registered since are reflected in the indices of reputable organizations like Freedom House, Reporters Without Borders, Transparency International, and many others. And of course, in the reports and resolutions of this very prestigious body. Most importantly, Armenia successfully conducted 2 snap parliamentary elections that earned both domestic and international recognition as completely free and fair, including by this august body. These milestones demonstrated a genuine transition, ensuring that the will of the citizens is accurately reflected at the ballot box. This June, Armenia will hold parliamentary elections. For us, it represents a vital milestone in cementing the irreversibility of our democracy. It is the moment where the Armenian people will once again demonstrate that their will is the only source of power in our country. However, we are not naive to the realities of the modern world. We know that the enemies of freedom do not sleep. We must acknowledge that they can be very creative. They are ready to pump millions of dollars into propaganda machines and illegal schemes of interference, and they own near limitless media resources. They want to derail our sovereign choice for peace and democracy, and they want to take us back into the darkness of authoritarianism, endless conflict with neighbors, and weak sovereignty. They want to use the very tools and mechanisms of democracy to destroy democracy. confronting these challenges has become a daily activity. Of course, there comes the dilemma and the delicate line between upholding the freedom of expression, pluralistic media on one hand, and, on the other hand, the decisiveness to confront the malign actors aiming to misuse the freedom and undermine the trust in society, our democracy itself. Those efforts will only increase as Armenia is heading towards parliamentary elections this year. But I stand here to tell you, they will not succeed. Our society has developed an immunity to lies, and our resolve to defend our hard-won freedoms is stronger than any shadow operation. To protect democracy in Armenia, we will rely on democracy itself and the mechanisms it provides, as also outlined by the Prime Minister of Armenia, Mr. Pashinyan, just months ago in his address to this body. We will be both prudent and decisive with our partners, including the Council of Europe and its Parliamentary Assembly. We will ensure that these elections will serve as a showcase of our democratic resilience. Distinguished parliamentarians, despite the painful experiences of recent years, including the war and the humanitarian consequences that followed, Armenia has made a clear and deliberate choice for peace, taking strong steps that enabled the South Caucasus to move to peace and cooperation in the region and beyond. The Washington Peace Summit on August 8, 2025 marked a historical turning point with the signing of the joint declaration by Armenia's Prime Minister and Azerbaijan's President, the United States President as a witness. Together with the Foreign Minister of Azerbaijan, we have initialed the agreement on establishment of peace and interstate relations between the Republic of Armenia and the Republic of Azerbaijan, establishing principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity as the indispensable foundations for lasting peace and stability in our region. For Armenia, this is a solemn pledge to our citizens, to all who suffered through decades of conflict, and to our future generations, that we will choose cooperation over confrontation, hope over despair, development over decline. Meanwhile, respect for human rights and dignity is crucial to restoring trust and reconciliation between societies, turning the page of decades of suffering and paving the way for a peaceful future. Indeed, the recent release of the 4 Armenian prisoners held in Azerbaijan offers hope for this. The subsequent release of the remaining 19 Armenian detainees currently still held in Azerbaijan, as well as the cooperation in clarification of the fate of missing persons, would undoubtedly represent a meaningful contribution to reconciliation. Peace, much like the democracy, cannot be taken for granted. It must be constantly nurtured, defended, and renewed in the face of both external and internal pressures. In this context, I want to stress that we deeply value the Council of Europe's consistent attention to our region and appreciate the unwavering commitment of the Secretary General, the PASE President, and this Assembly in supporting the normalization between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Your support for lasting peace, the humanitarian dimension of normalization, and human rights remain vital as we turn the page of decades of enmity. We thank you for standing with us on this historic path toward a stable and prosperous future. At the same time, Armenia remains fully dedicated to the full normalization of relations with Turkey. Continued progress in Armenia-Turkey normalization, including the full opening of the border and establishment of diplomatic relations and restoration of the Gyumri-Kars railway, will be crucial investment in strengthening regional stability and prosperity. Distinguished members of the Assembly, last spring, the Parliament of Armenia adopted the law initiating the EU accession process. The support from both the government and parliament underscores that our shared vision of European integration is not just a political goal, but a societal choice driven by civic initiative. This represents the democratic will of the Armenian people to anchor our future in the European family of nations as an authentic reflection of our values and identity. Another milestone was achieved last December when the strategic agenda for the Armenian-EU partnership was adopted in Brussels, complementing the Armenian-EU Comprehensive and Enhanced Partnership Agreement, CEPA, elevating our partnership to a strategic level. In May this year, in Yerevan, we will host heads of state of Europe to participate in the 8th summit of the European political community, a crucial pan-European platform to discuss evolving challenges and identify necessary steps to address them. Madam President, Armenia's unwavering dedication to democracy, human rights, and the rule of law defines who we are as a nation. Today, we renew the choice we made 25 years ago. We do so knowing that our journey of peace and democracy will face tests, that external pressures will seek to divert us, and that the road ahead remains challenging. But we also know that we do not walk this path alone. The people of Armenia know this. The Council of Europe and this Assembly stand with us. For this partnership, for this solidarity, and for the shared belief that our common values are worth defending, we express our profound gratitude. It is symbolic that following our exchange on the occasion of 25th anniversary of Armenia's membership to the Council of Europe, we will present Armenia's official gift to the Secretary General, a manuscript reproduction of the first Armenian legal code, Datastanagirk, created in the 12th century. This masterpiece serves as a reminder of our nation's deep-rooted dedication to justice and the rule of law. I invite you all to join us for this special occasion. I thank you for your attention. I will respond with pleasure to your questions, if any.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mirzoyan, for your really relevant and timely address. Members of the Assembly have now the possibility to put questions on you, and we will first hear the questions on the representatives on behalf of the political groups. They will all have 30 seconds for the questions, and after each question of the representatives of the political groups, I will ask you for your answer, and the first on my list on behalf of SOC is Titus Kolatian. Please, Titus.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Minister, I express the appreciation of the Socialist Group and of my own country, Romania, for the brave decision taken by your government to agree a peace treaty with Azerbaijan and to promote peace and cooperation in your region. Also for your declared engagement for a historic EU accession process. For achieving this goal, your country needs stability and continuity, including after the June parliamentary elections. Do you envisage relevant challenges, hybrid attacks, for instance, from Russia, trying to undermine the electoral process, and how we, the European partners, can help you in this regard? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister.
Thank you very much for your very important question. Well, the majority, at least a very serious part of my speech was exactly about the hybrid threats and our readiness to protect our democracy using the tools that democracy itself provides. Of course, we assume that the challenges and the hybrid attacks will continuously increase as we approach to the elections which are going to take place in early days of June, most probably. But we also, like I said, have very certain immunity to all these hybrid threats. Well, the good news is that we have been living in the environment full with hybrid threats during past 4 or 5 years. We have witnessed and survived a military coup d'etat. We have witnessed violent protest movements on the street, some other expressions of hybrid attacks. We are living in, confronting the false information, disinformation, manipulation of information is part of our daily life in Armenia, as I assume in many countries of yours, dear members of the Assembly. What you can do, what this august body can do, well, standing by Armenia, standing by Armenia's democracy, expressing the readiness to support verbally and politically and publicly expressing the will, the readiness to continue the support to Armenian democracy on the ground. Please come to Armenia, see what's going on in Armenia physically. And we're pretty much sure that we will together jointly, we will overcome all possible hybrid attacks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The question on behalf of EPP comes from Ricardo Carvalho.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Minister, the EPP places strong value on the rule of law, human rights, and European stability. In the context of South Caucasus, what clear commitments is your government prepared to take towards a lasting peace with Azerbaijan, based on international law, territorial integrity, and the effective protection of populations affected by the conflict? Finally, how do you assess the role of the European Union, in particular the European Union civilian mission in Armenia, and what extent is Armenia ready to further align politically with the European Union, including on foreign and security policy? Thank you very much.
Mr. Minister, please.
Well, thank you very much for this very important question as well. We do enjoy peace now between Armenia and Azerbaijan. It's been already several months, and our belief is that by our daily care, because peace continuously needs to be taken care of and nurturing, so we are also believe that in future as well, the two nations, Armenia and Azerbaijan, we will continue enjoying peace and cooperation. It is interesting to note that since the August 8th Peace Summit and Peace Declaration, there already have several developments already have taken place on the ground. For instance, we cannot avoid mentioning this, and we do this with pleasure and with acknowledgement. Azerbaijan has already lifted the ban for transits for goods to Armenia. Now the two countries we have started a bilateral trade, and the two countries, respective agencies and committees, are currently discussing other possibilities of bilateral trade from Armenia and transit of goods from Armenia to Azerbaijan, from Azerbaijan to Armenia. So this is already quite a milestone and quite an achievement. Also, in frames of Washington Peace Summit, another very interesting development took place. The leaders agreed upon the principles of unblocking the regional transport communications, unblocking the infrastructure. They defined the fundamental principles, and you mentioned some of them: territorial integrity, sovereignty of the states, national jurisdiction of the states over the infrastructure. This is also very important to note, because for months, during the months and the years of negotiations, there have been several interpretations of national jurisdiction. Now the national jurisdiction or sovereignty over the infrastructure is fully acknowledged, written down, signed and published. By the way, this important thing also was reconfirmed just weeks ago, on 14th of January this year already. We, with our American partners, agreed upon more detailed principles and modalities of operating the infrastructure. You also know that during the Peace Summit in Washington, we agreed to establish TRIP, Trump Road for International Peace and Prosperity. This is part of the infrastructure on Armenia's sovereign territory. It will be operating according to our legislation and under our the jurisdiction. And this TRIP, along with the other parts of transport transit infrastructure, will enable the two countries not only to become a transit hub, to make South Caucasus a transit hub for transits, for connecting people, but also goods, also the countries from EU to Central Asia and the opposite direction. But also it will become another semantic factor of peace and cooperation in our region. So there are several components of the peace. There is the treaty, which has been initialed and hopefully is going to be signed and ratified in coming months and hopefully months. And also there is the component of unblocking of communications. There is the component of helping each other when it comes to transit. Things are really happening, things are really moving forward, and we hope for and make every possible effort to make sure that this will bring us to a better future. Thank you.
We indeed share this hope. The next question will be posed by Edward Lee on behalf of ECPA.
Minister, the Armenian Apostolic Church is 1,700 years old and one of the last bastions of independent thought in Armenia. Mr. Pashinyan, the Prime Minister, stated that he wants to take over the Armenian Apostolic Church and replace it with, quote, a state-centered church, one that is banned from dissenting from the state. And to this end, he has arrested a third of the bishops of Armenia. How is this anything other than a violation of the democratic rights of religious freedom and freedom of speech that every member of the Council of Europe is supposed to uphold?
Mr. Minister.
Thank you very much for this question. I really acknowledge that this is a question, this is a rumor, I'm sorry for using this word, that should be touched upon and clarified. But before that, I will, if you allow, I will continue. I understand that I missed the part of your question, the EU civilian mission, which was deployed to Armenia to monitor the situation and stability along the Armenian-Azerbaijani border. Back then, when this decision, respective decision, was made by our EU colleagues and the member states, we really needed the presence of an objective monitoring mission. And this is, for me, another opportunity to express our gratitude to those who made this decision in EU and member states. I should also state that, indeed, this mission played a significant role in and supported the real stability along Armenian Azerbaijani border. We also understand that time has passed and now we do have peace, and we should think how this mission can continue to support our internal, maybe some border management capacities, maybe others. So I'm very sorry to taking a little bit time from your question, but I acknowledge, Sir Edward, your efforts and your contribution in the cause of preservation of Armenian cultural and spiritual heritage in Jerusalem, the Armenian quarter of Jerusalem. At the same time, I'm afraid, and I have to say that I completely disagree with some of your qualifications, and I'm afraid your information is not completely true, to say the least. There is no persecution of clergymen in Armenia. But I want to come up with a question to you. You have a situation when some citizens of Armenia publicly call for violent remove of democratically elected government from power through coup d'etats, and public calls for, and I invite your attention here, public calls for assassination of some of the leadership of Armenia, including myself, by the way. And what would be your decision? What would be your actions in this situation? To me, there is rule of law in Armenia, and everyone, all the citizens of Republic of Armenia must abide the law, be it a clergyman, be it a politician, an official, I don't know, a conductor, an artist, whoever. So indeed, There are now ongoing judicial proceedings, and I don't want to anyhow undermine the presumption of innocence. But also we have heard these public calls upon removal of power, violently removal of power of democratically elected government, and also calls for assassination. Yeah, that's the very sad reality in Armenia. We do have some clergymen who did this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next question we hear comes from Madame Louise Morel on behalf of ALDE.
Madame la Présidente, Monsieur le Ministre, je voudrais à mon tour saluer les avancées récentes sur la voie d'une paix durable entre l'Arménie et l'Azerbaïdjan à travers l'accord qui a été signé en août 2025 à Washington. Je voudrais aussi vous assurer du soutien de mon groupe dans vos actions pour lutter contre les ingérences étrangères, pour lutter contre l'argent russe et aussi de votre action tout singulièrement sur ce sujet dans l'Église. Monsieur le Ministre, malheureusement, comme d'autres pays, vous êtes vous aussi confronté à ces ingérences étrangères dans votre politique interne, aussi en ce qui concerne votre rapprochement avec l'Union européenne. Comment cette Assemblée peut-elle vous aider, et tout singulièrement alors que vous êtes la seule démocratie dans la région? Je vous remercie.
Merci. Mr. Mirzoyan.
Well, thank you very much for the question. Basically, I already had the chance to address this question, to speak a little bit about the hybrid attacks against Armenia's democracy and the readiness of democratic powers and the people of Armenia, most importantly, and determination of the people of Armenia to protect the democracy in Armenia. We also use this opportunity to express our gratitude to all our international partners, which even today, currently, at this very moment, work together with my colleagues from Armenian administration to make sure that these hybrid attacks do not succeed and Armenian democracy survives again, and this is very important to emphasize, using only democratic tools and mechanisms that democracy itself provides. As for the in regard with our policy towards deepening and significantly deepening our relations with the European Union, yes, this is part of our policy. Like I said during my speech, Armenian Parliament adopted a specific law making it mandatory for any government of the Republic of Armenia to implement this policy of getting a full membership in the European Union. Meanwhile, to this end, we are currently implementing various steps together jointly with our EU colleagues, including the sectoral integration, including, for instance, the visa liberalization, the several tools and mechanisms to support Armenia's democracy, like the European Peace Facility, like the Growth and Resilience Plan that was implemented, and hopefully we will continue our joint efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. And the round on behalf of the questions of political groups are concluded by Lara Costel on behalf of UL.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dear Minister, the peace process with Azerbaijan continues to face challenges related to the finalization and implementation of a comprehensive agreement, the border delimitation, a secure and sovereign connectivity, and outstanding humanitarian issues, including detainees, missing persons, and the rights of displaced populations. In this context, I know that you have explained a lot, but maybe you could elaborate more. How is your government working to advance the dialogue and confidence building, and what steps are being taken to promote progress with appropriate international support towards a sustainable and just peace? Thank you.
Mr. Minister, please.
Thank you very much. Both the government, the political circles, and also the people of Armenia really make every possible effort to make sure that the peace established between Armenia and Azerbaijan is lasting, and this peace and the agreements that we have had already agreed between Armenia and Azerbaijan help us to bring the two countries and the region as a whole to the era of cooperation and prosperity. At the same time, we acknowledge that there are several layers of this very complex issue, and one is the humanitarian dimension, the fate of missing persons, the release of the 19 Armenian detainees from captivity from Azerbaijan. These are issues that should be addressed. Both the government and the civil society of Republic of Armenia, we continue our efforts and our negotiations, our discussions with, first of all, with Azerbaijani colleagues, but also with our international partners, because your support and your contribution is this very important issue is crucial, is vital, and will be much appreciated. I already touched upon one of the aspects of ongoing and the peace process of established peace. And here I'm speaking about the bilateral trade between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I'm speaking about the transit through territory of Azerbaijan to Armenia. Also, it is important to emphasize that immediately after this lift of ban by Azerbaijan, Armenia publicly, and the Prime Minister of the Republic of Armenia publicly declared that the borders of the Republic of Armenia are now open for transit to Azerbaijan and for Azerbaijan, as well as to Turkey and from Turkey. Unfortunately, our neighbors haven't used this opportunity so far. But also, along with this economic layer, economic aspect of the issue, I should also mention the cooperation and the dialogue that is established and is ongoing between the representatives of civic society. So since August, several visits took place to Azerbaijan and to Armenia, visits by respectively Armenian and Azerbaijani representatives of civil society. This is also a very important channel. Also, distinguished colleague, you mentioned the delimitation. I thank you for bringing this part of the process, Armenian and Azerbaijani normalization, to our attention as well. Delimitation basically is one of the cornerstones of this process. Within this process, and even before initialing the peace treaty, peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and even before the Washington Peace Summit, the two respective committees, border commissions of Azerbaijan and Armenia, they have agreed upon a document which was ratified by the Parliament of Republic of Armenia, and also it got the necessary internal procedures in Azerbaijan as well. So this was the first ever document, official document, agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And in this document, the two countries, through their border commissions, they agreed that the delimitation of the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan should take place on the basis of Alma-Ata Declaration. And I'm very sorry, dear colleagues, for overloading you with too many details, but this is the context that I should mention. So Alma-Ata Declaration is the document which was signed by former Soviet Union republics, saying basically two things: that first of all, Soviet Union is stopping existing, and secondly, that newly independent states recognize that the former administrative borders between them as Soviet Socialist republics are now becoming interstate and internationally recognized borders between them as independent states. So why this is important? This means that even before the Washington summit, Armenia and Azerbaijan, they recognized that the delimitation should take place on the basis of Alma-Ata Declaration. So the borders that existed between them during Soviet times, at the time at least of the collapse of Soviet Union, are the international borders. So they recognized each other's, fully recognized each other's territorial integrity. And this made possible to have a very tangible achievements when it comes to the limitation. Part of our small part, but it is still an achievement. Part of our border is already delimited, and the respective commissions, they continue working. Another very interesting nuance, like I said, this document, it passed through internal domestic procedures, including the approval by the Constitutional Court of Armenia. So this is interesting to note. By that time, and by doing that, Constitutional Court of Armenia recognized that the borders which were established or recognized, acknowledged by the Almaty Declaration are fully constitutional and have no contradiction with the Constitution of Armenia. Thank you, and I'm very sorry for this long and probably boring answer.
Not boring at all. I will give the floor now to other speakers, and I will group them always in three, and after the three, ask you to ask for the question, and the very first one on my list is Andrea Ida-Kitschtaler.
Herr Minister, ich werde auf Deutsch reden. Sie haben uns erklärt, dass nun Frieden in dem Land ist, und Sie haben auch Gott sei Dank jetzt sehr viel ausgeführt. Es interessiert uns sehr, wie es in Ihrem Land jetzt aussieht. Es wurde auch ein Abkommen zur Stärkung der wirtschaftlichen Beziehungen mit den USA unterzeichnet, auch als Garantiemacht für den Handel im Sangisoar-Korridor. Wann wird dieser benutzbar sein, und wie schauen Ihre Beziehungen jetzt zur USA aktuell aus? Und ganz konkret auch noch, wie laufen die Vorbereitungen zu den Wahlen im Juni? Danke.
Danke sehr. Next on the list is Bisera Kostadinowska-Stojewska. Please, Bisera.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Mirzonian, I had the privilege of being in Armenia on one occasion, but I went through the visa process that was quite long. So my question to you is, what are your overtakings? What do you think of the visa liberalization process between Armenia and North Macedonia? Thank you.
Thank you. And the third is Hassan Datchoy.
Dear Foreign Minister, as you have mentioned in your speech, plus we are following the rapprochement between Armenia and Turkey. Is there any timetable for opening the borders between the two neighbor countries?
Mr. Minister, please, when you are ready to reply.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues. So Armenia, United States relations with the United States of America, we have established strategic partnership. This was declared, signed last year. And then this readiness and commitment of the United States was reaffirmed by the current administration of President Trump. Along with the August 8 Peace Summit and Peace Declarations and establishment of peace, opening the communication between Armenia and Azerbaijan, another event took place, and this is a little bit, usually this remains in the shadow of the peace achievements and Peace Summit. On that very day, bilaterally, we and the United States of America also agreed upon several memorandums of understandings where the two countries expressed commitment to deepen cooperation when it comes to infrastructure, the trip route, I already spoke about it, but also when it comes to semiconductors, artificial intelligence, also energy. We just already finished negotiations over an agreement which will make possible to establish cooperation in the field of nuclear energy, atomic energy. So the relations between Armenia and the United States of America are developing. We are jointly with our American colleagues exploring new areas and possibilities, new horizons for deepening our relations. So far, at this very moment, we see commitment and readiness from the two sides, and we truly believe that this will lead us to deeper cooperation. Visa liberalization. I really welcome and thank you for this question. Dear colleague, you are always welcomed in Armenia. Please come again. By that time, by the time of your new visit or next visit, maybe we, together with our North Macedonian colleagues, will finish the process of liberalization of the visa processes between our two countries. I take this as a note for my further homework. I will get in contact with my dear colleagues from your country, but also I would like to say that in general, people-to-people contacts, having in mind the traditional, very deep ties that people of Armenia has had and still currently is enjoying with Balkan states and larger Europe, people-to-people contacts and mutual visits are really very important as we implement our policy of bringing Armenia closer to EU and Europe in general. So we also, you may be aware, dear colleague, that we have launched a visa liberalization dialogue with the European Union as well. And luckily, and knock on the wood, this process flows quite smoothly and in a very rapid and fast manner. We already, although we just started the conversation, the dialogue, we already got the action plan, and we already jointly with our EU colleagues are working on daily basis to make sure that we have visa-free regime between Armenia and EU. The sooner the better, probably, I don't know, hopefully in coming months, maybe next year, we'll see. But I will say that people in Armenia, they very much hope that they will see this visa-free regime in coming months. Thank you. Armenia, Turkey, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, if I may to continue. So we do have very intense and fruitful dialogue with our Turkish counterparts. There is a quite rich agenda. There is commitment and readiness expressed several times by both sides that the final aim, final goal of this Armenian-Turkish dialogue is establishment of diplomatic relations between the two countries, officially, formally, and then complete opening of the border between the two countries, and of course then building the cooperation. So far, the two countries, we have succeeded to implement several confidence-building measures. We have agreed that the Gyumri-Kars railway, which I have talked about earlier today, is going to be restored, and the trade, including through this railway, is going to take place in very future. The main question is, if I speak very frankly, the question is not what. It is already agreed upon. The question is when. And my hope is that we will be seeing at least partial opening of the border in coming days and weeks, and then eventually full opening of the border. I'm confident that this will be beneficial for both people of Armenia and Turkey as well.
Thank you very much. Next we hear Yuri Kameltuk.
Thank you. Mr. Minister, how do you envision Armenia's long-term security model for the future, and what are red lines and de-escalation mechanism non-negotiable for you? Where do the negotiation on a peace agreement and border delimitation with Azerbaijan currently stand, and what are the remaining key sticking points which international border monitoring mechanism would Armenia consider acceptable, and what would be needed to make them genuinely effective rather than symbolic? And what concrete outcomes do you expect from close engagement with EU over the next 12 months? Thank you.
Thank you. And the last question comes from Gerardo Giovanoli. Please.
Presidente, onorevole Ministro, l'Armenia ha avuto un lungo conflitto con l'Azerbaigian. Da qualche mese finalmente è stata raggiunta una tregua e un'intesa, ma deve essere ancora verificata dalla prova del tempo. Come stanno andando realmente le cose secondo il punto di vista degli armeni? Il compromesso raggiunto è soddisfacente? L'Azerbaigian lo sta rispettando? Le ferite provocate da 30 anni di conflitto, se non curate, quanto rischiano di riaccenderlo? Cosa può fare il Consiglio d'Europa per aiutarvi ad evitarlo? Grazie.
Thank you. Mr. Minister, over to you. That was the last question.
Well, thank you very much, dear colleagues. I have to say that I already touched upon these topics and I basically answered to these questions. But once again, we are pretty much sure that the European Union will continue playing a vital and significant role in maintaining not only stability and prosperity in the region, cooperation in our region, in the South Caucasus, but also in strengthening Armenian institutions, like most probably the border management. So we are looking forward to this further engagement. In regard with how lasting the peace will be, you know, it depends on us, on all of us, on people in Armenia, on people in Azerbaijan. We have had a very sad, tragic story of enmity in our region. Story of a conflict which lasted decades. Story of conflict, roots of which go even deeper into the last century. So every single moment, those who are and will be in power in Armenia, but also who go for those who visit the ballot boxes during elections, will remember that peace needs to be taken care of. Peace needs to be nurtured. Now, peace is, it's very simple. Peace is better than war. Cooperation is better than confrontation. It is not easy. The wounds are still very fresh. There are still detainees, prisoners of war. There are still the missing persons whose fate is yet to be clarified jointly, by joint efforts, by respective agencies and professionals, experts from Azerbaijan and Armenia. There is huge psychological trauma in society. But also we understand that this trauma should be overcome. The steps should be undertaken by governments and by societies themselves, because governments can agree upon the papers, the governments can sign treaties, but the societies will not live in the environment and atmosphere of cooperation if they do not overcome the psychological trauma and if the societies do not reconcile. So it really, and also international community, international partners, all of us have our role to play in this further process of institutionalization of peace and also establishment of real reconciliation and cooperation between Armenia and Azerbaijan. But I'm really confident, dear colleagues, and this is probably the last remark that I want to share with you today. I'm really confident that the real peace, the real cooperation, prosperity of nations in South Caucasus is very tangible. It is very close, and I really see it happening in close near future. Thank you so much for your attention.
You have another, please.
Yeah, I've heard, dear colleagues, that some of the colleagues asked me a question, and I really don't want to leave any question unanswered. So one of the colleagues, if I understand it correctly, and if I'm not mistaken, spoke about a so-called Zangezur corridor. So once again, dear colleagues, I want to invite you to read the declaration that was signed by the President of Azerbaijan and the Prime Minister of Republic of Armenia. It is a public document. There is a very clear wording there. The sides agreed to open the transport transit infrastructure to unblock the connectivity issue, and also there is a provision about establishment of TRIP route, Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity. So there is no Zangezur corridor agreed by the sides. There is no Zangezur corridor, and of course, accordingly, respectively, there are no specific modalities for this non-existing Zangezur corridor. There is no corridor at all. There is TRIP route. Now, please read very clearly. It is public, and there is exact wording regarding this. But I don't want this last remark to spoil the whole positive atmosphere and environment that currently we are enjoying when it comes to normalization between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Thank you.
That brings us to the end of our exchange with Mr. Mirzoyan. On behalf of the Assembly, I would like to thank you very much for answering our questions so elaborate. Thank you very much. The Assembly will hold its next public sitting this afternoon at 3:40 with the agenda approved on Monday. The sitting is adjourned. I like that hammer.